Well, I don't think that we realized, or I realized, the impact of the war being over. Um, we lived in New York at the time, and I guess I was really too young to even remember General Douglas MacArthur and the end of World War II, and then soon the festivities started in the Korean situation, and MacArthur was in charge of U.S. operations in Korea. The Korean War was over by the time we enrolled at Middlebury, and there were some guys that came back, the vets that came back that had been students at Middlebury that left to go to Korea and then came back to finish up, so they were older than the rest of us. But the Korean War was pretty much over by the time that I joined the Army ROTC, which stands for Reserve Officer Training Corps. Well, I joined the Navy Reserve when I was about 16, and then when I went to college, when I went away to prep school, I was not able to attend the Naval Reserve meetings, and I wasn't allowed to leave the campus. And then when I went to college, there was no Naval Reserve training station nearby, so I was excused from having to go to those, and I joined ROTC, Army ROTC, and I think that was mandatory for the first 2 years, and then I think the second 2 years were voluntary. But if you were not an officer, well, you could be drafted whether you were an officer or not, but it was a good way to, let's say, I won't say avoid combat, but, well, the pay was better, the benefits were better, the living quarters were better, and as a matter of fact, you could only bring your wife with you if you were an officer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we moved into officers' quarters, which were much nicer. Those that weren't officers kind of had to get their own apartment in town, and we had a nice one bedroom, a little apartment on post, and they tried to keep the wives happy, and I swam a lot, and we'd cook out and we'd have good times together, and the women did things together. And then if Papa would be, sometimes he'd be on a bivouac and he'd be gone for several nights. He'd come home maybe in the middle of the night with his boots all wet and his clothes wet, and we'd put his boots in the oven to dry them out.
Mm-hmm.
And but I actually had quite a fine time.
We lived in, we had tents, two-man tents, and we ate what was called sea rations actually, which were not anything you looked forward to eating, but
Yeah.
it's better than starving. When I was in charge of a training company at Fort Knox, Kentucky, the raw recruits would come in on a bunch of buses, and they never, some of them had never had shoes on their feet, and were kids that were from what we now know as Appalachia.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very poor, and most of them didn't want to be there, but a number of them decided that the military life was good and decided to make a career out of it, and but they were non-commissioned officers. They were privates and corporals and sergeants. I was not all that concerned because I was married, and we had Laura, a daughter, and the chances of me being called up for active duty and sent to Vietnam were very, very slim. Fort Hays was a place we went for meetings only, and we didn't live there. I went for meetings, weekly evening meetings, and one evening I was told that I had fulfilled my total obligation of active duty and inactive duty, and I didn't have to come to the meetings anymore. And I was kind of dumbfounded. And that's when I found out that time that I had invested in the Naval Reserve actually counted against my Army requirements for active and inactive duty. So I wasn't happy. I wasn't sad. I guess I was just, well, I don't have to go to any more meetings, and I would have had to go to summer camp up at Fort Grayling, Michigan, for 2 weeks each summer. I was very happy I didn't have to do that.